Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Welcome, my friends, to the Modern Leadership Podcast. I am so excited to be with you today, and I have a special treat for you. As you know, I love to bring on guests that just rock, folks that have been in the trenches and can inspire us with their journey. So today, let me introduce Dana Malstaff. You are going to love her. Dana is the mother, author, business and content strategist, a coach, a podcaster, and a blind spot reducer. So I'm going to have to be a bit careful this interview not to let my blind spots shine. She's the author of Boss Mom, the ultimate guide to raising a business and nurturing your family like a pro, and the founder of Boss Mom. She serves boss moms who yearn for more time and less guilt when it comes to building their businesses, raising their families, and providing the tools that they need to get their content out, their business going, without sacrificing their family goals. And so, Dana, it's so great to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. How are you doing? This is a blast. I'm excited.
Hey, it's so wonderful to have you on the show. And I know you've got so much going on. You just came off of a huge activity that you had with Boss Mom, and you have people fired up and motivated everywhere. And I am just grateful that we could carve out a couple of minutes to sit down and talk about how we find our blind spots, how we create the lives of our dreams, and how we move forward as leaders in this world. But before we do that, I wanted to give you just a second and introduce yourself just a little bit more. Let us know a little bit more about you.
Sure. So, goodness. Well, you can probably tell I boss mom everything. So that's kind of what I do. I'm a mom. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a wife. I'm a daughter. I'm all of those things. But I quit my job just under 4 years ago to start my own consulting business, and immediately got pregnant. We had been trying to have children and weren't probably from working too much. My body was like, I don't know if you have enough time or space for this. Second, I quit my job. My body was like, we should probably have babies. So, immediately got pregnant and almost instantaneously knew I was not built to be a stay-at-home mom, which comes with a lot of guilt, a lot of questioning. Once my son was born, I wanted to be an amazing mom, but I also wanted him to take a nap so I could work on my business and figure all that out, because I was in those beginning stages of I'm going to quit my job and start my business. And then it was like, oh gosh, I need a website and a logo and a brand and all of those things. And so I found myself in a space where I just felt really, really bad about both things. Like I couldn't be good at both. And if I loved one or the other, there had to be this balance between loving both the same. And I, over that time, basically came to some really interesting realizations and moved out to California to be closer to my family when my son was about 5 months old, and just started to realize that I can love both, that I need to love both, that not just looking at my son, but looking out into the world and doing what I really care and love doing shows him how big the world can be. And that is one of the roles I have as a parent, isn't to sacrifice myself for my kids, but to show them what a good life lived looks like. And that became the Boss Mom brand before I knew the brand even existed. And I was in a mastermind and fortunate enough to be with, his name's Zul Toronas, who does book coaching, and said, is anybody interested in writing a book? And I raised my hand. I said, I am. I was a journalism major in school, so I should probably put that to good use. And we sat down, and what it turned out I wanted to write about was this whole feeling guilty about wanting to have a business, but also wanting to be a good parent. So we wrote the book, and even before we wrote it, we went out to the community that wasn't even my community at the time and said, hey, what do we do? What do you think do you think it would work? And so many people came back and said, yes, why does this space not exist already? Because there were tons of spaces for moms and tons of spaces for mom entrepreneurs, but none of them really honed in on this idea that we need to step away from the guilt we feel, because until we step out of that and recognize that we don't need to feel guilty about these things, that we can be both a good parent and a good entrepreneur at the same time, and that it's all one bucket. It's not this balance that we create. There was no space like that. And so like any good entrepreneur, I, finished the book and then started a podcast and then started a group coaching program and then started events. And we pretty much boss mom everything you can boss mom now. And it's growing so incredibly rapidly. I mean, we had 400% revenue increase within less than a year. And it's been blowing up, and I fall more in love with it every single day. And since then I've had a second child. So I have a son and a daughter, and yeah, now we're here today. Getting like I get to get up and I have my coffee and I got my podcast gear on and get to chat with awesome people like you, and that's part of my job, which is pretty awesome.
And you just packed a whole bunch into that. And I want to take just a minute and dissect a little bit of it, because one of the things that you talked about and that I love, and I saw it on your website as I was preparing for this interview, and that is, one of the roles that we have as parents and as entrepreneurs, as business leaders. And really, when we look at it, a lot of times with work, we have our work life and we have our home life, and we try to keep those separated. I know for years, I used to have this ritual where I would drive home from work, and as soon as I would get out of the car, I would hang up my work worries and stresses and everything that was going on a little imaginary hook outside the door and walk through the door and become, the Jake from home, the dad Jake, and so on and so forth. But the reality is we're whole life individuals. And so as we unpack what you just talked about, and it sounds like you have a tremendous amount going on, and don't let me forget to talk to you about your podcast, because there's some amazing things there. But I want to talk to you about this personal work-life balance, what it means to you. One of the things that you talked about there is your role as an entrepreneur and as a parent. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah. It's so funny because I'll get people that will come on. They'll be like, Dan, I want to talk to you about how do you deal with work-life balance? And I was like, well, I don't believe it exists. And I actually believe giving it that term makes life harder for us, because balance to me is, I've got to have it perfectly on one side and perfectly on the other. And I always joke, like, if you remember Indiana Jones, like he's trying to the sand and he's trying to put it in so he can take the icon, and then you end up getting a big boulder chasing after you because balance doesn't work. Balance is continually making sure everything is exact. And sometimes my kids come as a priority. And honestly, sometimes my business is a priority. And I account for those things. If I have a massive launch going on in my business, I make sure that even if one of my kids gets sick, I mean, if something happened and my kid's in the hospital, obviously, but if my kid gets sick and comes home, I have somebody to back up, because I have to make my business a priority. And there are times when I only work with people who get that I have kids, and I will cancel meetings so I can go get my kids and do things. So, this idea of balance just isn't fruitful for us. It doesn't actually serve us. Instead, we want conscious integration, where we're just always assessing all of our priorities and how that fits into how we want to live our life. And then, we have what we call nap time hustlers, which are moms that have businesses on the side, and when their kids go to sleep, they work. And in some ways, I totally get that, because, I can't use a keyboard around my 18-month-old. It's just frustrating because she just wants to come and play with it. But I don't keep my work from my kids, because how do you think your kids feel when you go, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to leave you, I'm going to go to work? Work becomes a negative word. Like, we've been brought up to feel like work is this weight on us that we have to live in. Like you said, like when I'm sure there's one day when you hung up all of those office worries and you thought, God, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to do that? Wouldn't it be great if they weren't worries that I hung up that were really heavy and, and totally cumbersome, but I got to open the door and I was super excited to tell people in my family and everybody like what I was doing that day and how I'm living my life. That realization comes to us. It's like, wow, if I'm trying to keep it out of my family because I don't want it to burden them, then maybe I'm doing the wrong things, right? Maybe I'm doing the stuff that isn't making me happy. So I feel like if you feel the need to not let your kids see what you're doing that's quote unquote work, then you're doing the wrong work. Like, find the things that light you up, because when your kids see that they can also do things that financially provide for the family that also lights you up and makes you energized and excited, then they're going to see the world as a place where they can do things that are energizing and exciting. Otherwise, work is just this horrible word where we grow up and we have to go to work later. And then we just perpetuate this cycle that really isn't helpful to anybody.
Well, and I love that concept that work is not a bad word. In fact, if we look back, our parents, and we used to walk to school both ways uphill in the snow, and they would talk about the work that they did. And one of the things that kids, the generations growing today, they're not seeing the same value of work. Work is becoming more or less a dirty word. And so I love this concept that, work is important. It's important that our kids understand this. And one of the things that you talked about in the intro is this 400% growth that your company's been experiencing. And part of that is because you found a way to align your passion with your work. You're enthusiastic, you're excited, you want to go out and do it, you want to make the world a better place, and you feel called to do what you're doing. And I think that comes out. I think people that go and hang up their worries on the hook before entering the house, they're doing that more to escape what they're leaving behind than they are with that passion and that excitement that you're bringing to the table. So that's one of the things that I pulled out there. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, I told you I'd come back to it. You talked about in the intro, and I'm just going back up to it now so I can go back through it here. Author, business and content strategist, coach, podcaster. You're running events. You basically boss mommed everything. And
Yeah.
when you say you're a podcaster, I call myself a podcaster. I put out an episode every Thursday. You're a podcaster who puts out episodes a little more often than that. And so I got to ask, as a podcaster, how are you getting it all done? How can you be all of these things and still have time to be sane?
Sure. Sure. We do 3 episodes a week. Yeah. So we do a lot. We do a lot in the podcast space, but honestly, I have an amazing team. In the very beginning, didn't plan on being an island, and even things that I could do. So I come from a background from broadcast journalism was my degree. So and then did design work. So I know how to design. I know how to do audio editing and video editing. I know all of those things. But what I know and can do is very different than what I should do in my business. So very early on, when I started Boss Mom, I knew I need to go out and make sure I'm getting the right team. So there are actually 4 people on my podcast team. I have somebody that does the show notes. I have somebody that does all the visuals. I have somebody that does the audio, and then I have somebody that does the social media. And those 4 people, I use a tool called Trello, which is I call it my work wife. It's basically a free project management tool that I use for everything in my business and my life. It manages everything. It keeps tabs on everything and workflows me through everything. And we have a really systematized workflow where I'm a big automations and systems person. So I have, when somebody comes in to get interviewed, they do it through my Acuity tool, my scheduling tool, and that through Zapier, depending on how you want to pronounce it, zaps over to Trello, creates a board, tags Danielle and my team. It includes all the information we already need from them. She can pull them into the schedule. And so each person in the flow does what they do, and we've automated as much as possible. And then we are able to sort of batch we do 1 interview a week. My sort of co-host that does 1 interview with me a week, and then I do a Nurture Your Business solo show once a week, and we just batch them. We do different batches of interviews and that kind of thing, and then we just make sure everybody flows through and does their job. And it honestly doesn't feel very burdensome. There's a lot of other things in my business feel a lot more burdensome. Once you get the flow of something and you've got it just working the way it's supposed to work, it just feels like I record things and then I put them out where they're supposed to be, and everybody else does their job. And then I wake up in the morning and things are where they're supposed to be, doing what they're supposed to do. It's a beautiful thing.
It is absolutely beautiful. And I think that we are living in a time that is so magical in that, can you imagine trying to do this 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
Oh, no.
I mean, the technology today has opened up, and I often chuckle, when we took personality tests growing up and they said, these are the types of jobs that you should do. The jobs that you and I are doing didn't exist. I mean, they couldn't have appeared on personality tests because they weren't there yet. And here we are doing them, loving them. And now because of the automation and things like that, we're able to create full teams and put out content from around the world in limited time. And it's just amazing. So I love that you shared that. I saw your podcast schedule and I thought, oh my goodness, she must have a terrific team because your stuff looks great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's Yeah, it's so funny because I like my internship in college was in a radio show. So I also think like I did an article before on, on podcasting, like what to do in your podcasting. And one of the things I said before you ever start a podcast is decide whether you actually are okay with sitting by yourself in a room talking to nobody, and how that makes you feel. Like I get so much energy with my cool, Yeti microphone and my pop filter, and I turn everything on and I get it rolling, or like talking with you. Like I love this. This makes me super happy. I get super energized. And actually I batch things. So I like to batch video taping for my business, like training I'm going to do, or promotion videos or things like that. I like to batch it for after interviews like this, or when I'm interviewing somebody, because it gets me so energized that I know I've already put my makeup on, like I already look relatively decent. And afterwards, I just turn it off from talking with you and getting all pumped up, and I go right into the things I want to train on. And so I already have that energy flowing. So I'm conscious that it works really, really well for me. And I tell people, like, if you're going to do a podcast, or you're going to do a YouTube, or you're going to do whatever it is, or Facebook Lives, like make sure that that's a space you actually really enjoy being in. Because if it feels really cumbersome, it feels that like, oh my gosh, I hate doing this. I wish it's so hard for me to do it all the time. Then maybe it's not the right space for you. And podcasting isn't for everybody, and YouTubing isn't for everybody. Like you got to find the thing that comes easy to you and naturally, and you can actually enjoy it, because you're way more likely to be successful in that space if it's your total jam.
Yeah. And it's really taking what you're good at and crossing it with what you like, and crossing that with what people need. And I think that relates to anybody's career, whether they're in podcasting or in digital content like we are, or if they're in what we would term the traditional, I sit in my cubicle all day. If you can find a place where your expertise can mesh with what you're passionate about and people actually want it and need it, well, then you're ready to go. And I, like you, Dana, I love the podcast, the medium. I love to get on the microphone. This is one of my most favorite things, talking to myself. And I chuckle because I'm the same way. I like to put the things that I don't enjoy as much right after I record a podcast, because then I come off that high and that energy, and I'm able to travel that energy right through to my next project, because people can feel your energy. And no matter what job you're working in, when you have passion, when you have excitement, when you're heading to work, taking the stairs two at a time, running on the balls of your feet, people can feel that. And so I appreciate you sharing that. One of the questions I wanted to ask you then is, it hasn't been all rainbows and butterflies. It hasn't been all just coasting along. Even with a team, there are ups and there are downs. And so how do you combat that mental fatigue, or that emotional drain, or that physical fatigue of just getting it all done, especially when you're going through struggle times?
Sure. Well, I'm a big believer in continual assessment and continual tweak. Like that's what you do. Businesses are built on tweaking, not on pivoting all the time. I see that most often in businesses where they'll be like, oh, this thing isn't working. I was trying it for a little while, so I'm just going to try something completely different. And I think the persistence of just tweaking things until it works is one of the keys to creating a successful business over time. And so when things get challenging for me, I do an assessment. I mean, I actually do an assessment every single week, but when I feel like something is really stressing me out, or I'm not able to get things done. So I'll give you an example. We just did a big, 100-person event it was the Boss Mom Retreat. And I basically have it where my group coaching program, which is called the Academy, was open for 2 weeks, and we were going to sell people into it right after. Well, I found I'm so energized by people, because I'm your textbook extrovert, that after everybody left, and I could have totally done that every day forever, hung out with 100 people and been up on stage. But after everybody left, all of a sudden I was alone in my office again, and I was kind of depressed. Like I didn't feel focused. I didn't feel the energy. But I had to get on these calls. I had to do this work. I had to, do things that I already had in the schedule. And I found that I didn't like it. I didn't like the way it felt. It felt like I wasn't getting as much done as I normally did, which then makes you feel even worse. And I kind of went down this spiral where I just wanted to cry on the floor in the bathroom, but was like, I don't have time. Right. And so what I did is I called one of my good friends, Dawn, and I said, come over. I need you. We need to sit down. And we reassessed how I'm going to do this in the future. So basically we changed the flow of how I'm going to open and close my group coaching program to go 2 months before the 2 retreats that we want to do. And then that way they'll have been in the program for 2 months, and then they'll be able to go to the program. And at the program, what we're going to sell is a day before for beginning in your business and a day after if you're growing your business, mastermind VIP days. And that's the way we're going to. And then we have a course that we do. So basically, the way I recentered myself to go, I can get through this, is I took what didn't feel good, what felt overwhelming, and I sat for a minute and I reassessed my overall big business plan. So what I don't do is I don't go, gosh, I feel overwhelmed. What's the one little tiny thing that I can do that makes me feel productive right now? Because to me, then it's just the next thing that I didn't do because I did that one other thing. But if I sit back for a minute and I look at my overall plan and say, okay, now I know that next time I've got this covered, then all of a sudden the next day I woke up and I was like, yeah, all right, I've got that covered. I know that's not going to happen again. Now I can dig in. And I was totally, came over me this new wave of motivation, because I wasn't just doing the one other thing I needed to do, but the 10 things that didn't get done. I was actually planning for the future of my business. In my mind, that means the future of my business exists, which means I'm going to get through this because I figured out how I'm going to do it next time. So we're just going to keep doing that. And so for me, we look at the small thing, but I think when you're really overwhelmed, stop for a second and look at the big picture and how you could tweak so the whole big picture still works and is sustainable, and it's going to help get you through.
And what I hear, an example that I would give along those same lines is like a birthday or a holiday present that you would get. You remember when you were a kid growing up and you couldn't sleep 2 weeks before Christmas or the holidays or whatever you celebrate your birthday, you couldn't sleep because you were so excited about what the future held. But then as you get older and now, all the presents under the tree or near the birthday cake, you know what they are because you paid for them. You start sleeping just fine. You're not as excited about the future. And that's what I hear you saying about your business. When you're just doing the same thing over and over, when you're just getting up to go to work and do what you're supposed to do, there's no passion, there's no excitement in that. It doesn't motivate, it doesn't have that vision of the future. But then when you start to take a step back and envision what you can become, what you're building to, and the difference that you're making, well, then you get excited. It's hard to sleep. You're up early because you're right back at it. And so really appreciate you jumping into that. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, even though I want to be a little careful about this, so don't go pointing out all my blind spots, but you are a blind spot spotting expert. And I think of that as mentoring and working with others. And of course, you have your academy and you have this boss mom retreat that you've done where you're constantly working with people. And so I want to ask you a little bit about mentoring and the role that mentors have played in your life and the role that they should play in all of us as leaders as we move forward.
Yeah, sure. So I think first off, I think every single person you meet has value to bring. I did an article once of like the 10 different kinds of mentors you have in your life because they're everywhere, right? We've got your classical mentor, right? Which is the person that's 20 years ahead of you and that is going to impart wisdom that they've learned through the years. But then there's what I call like your proximity mentor, which is someone who's in your exact same space doing exactly what you're doing. They're just doing it their way and they're going to teach you things about what works for them. And you're going to teach them things about what works for you. And so you have, those kinds of, you have the sort of reverse mentor where it's somebody who you think you're mentoring, but ends up giving you something really a beautiful gem of genius, right? That you never that changes the way you think about things. So there's all these different ways. I think what we do is we think about mentors as somebody who's ahead of us that we need to learn from in all aspects of life. And there is nobody that is exactly like us 5 or 10 years from now. So what I do from a mentor perspective is I have as many as I can. And I'm constantly mindful and open when somebody gives me advice, even if it's not advice I want to hear, that I'm trying to say, how can I use this? What can I get from it? When it's somebody that's telling me something within the community about maybe what they'd love to see or what would work really well or how I'm doing something, I'm listening for that because every single person in my sphere, has something to give. And so I look at mentorship that way. Now, coaching, though, is a whole different thing. I go to very specific people for very specific things. If I'm going to start a group coaching program, I went to somebody who knows exactly how to start group coaching programs. And I said, how do I do this? Tell me. And I asked them for very specifically what I need. So when it comes to mentoring, I get it from everybody. And when it comes to coaching, I go very specifically to what I need. I get what I need, and then we move to the next thing that I need. So I generally don't ever have the same kind of coach for more than 6 months to a year, but I always have tons of mentors surrounding me at all different times. And honestly, the mentorship is where I think that blind spot reducing happens, because if you're open to everybody giving you potential advice that could work for you, even the person that you don't even think is telling you advice about business, but it somehow relates, like when you really are open to it, those are the people that are going to help you see the world in such a more broad way than you are right now. And that's what blind spot reducing really is. Blind spot reducing is, I have women that are like, I found my people and I'm in this mom community. And I'm like, that's amazing. Don't forget to get out of this community every once in a while, because what happens is we get blinders on into this little tiny niche that we think is our space, but the rest of the world's still happening around us. And we still need to relate to our husbands and our friends and I don't want to walk outside and meet somebody who's in a corporate job and judge them because, oh my gosh, you're in corporate America. Like, no, great. Do what you love. If you really like it, if you don't, hey, I'll talk to you and we'll over a glass of wine about maybe things you could do to get into a different job. I want to live in a world that's very broad, that's very big. And we want to take down those blinders, because when we pull in multiple perspectives about life and where we are and what we're doing, that's when those blinders come down and we start to see things and opportunities and creativity and ideas that broaden our ability to be successful in business and in life.
And you're absolutely right. We can learn from everyone. Everyone comes from a different background. They see the world through a different lens. And when we start having dissenting opinions, or when we have people that see the world differently than us, that gives us an opportunity to evaluate what we see, what we believe, and what the direction that we're going, and really move in that direction. I read a quote the other day that said, if you and I agree on everything, one of us is irrelevant or unnecessary or not needed. And so I really love that perspective of finding people in your life that can give you a different look, a different view than, everyone else or your community. So I really appreciate that, Dana. We're getting close to the end of the podcast here, and there's a new segment that I think the audience is just going to absolutely love. We're calling it Learning from Leaders, and it's just 6 rapid fire questions just to kind of get to know you just a little bit better. And so if you're ready, we're ready. Do you want to jump in?
I'm gonna try my best.
That's all we can ask. Perfect. The book currently on your Kindle or bedside table?
Yeah. So Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert.
Best movie ever made?
Oh, I'm gonna have to say Braveheart. Definitely Braveheart.
What is your leadership superpower?
Brainstorming.
Oh, that's a good one. Please share a motivational quote, philosophy, or mantra with us.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to go funny. Got to risk it to get the biscuit.
Nice. And if you could leave one leadership trait to your kids, what would it be?
Resilience.
And the best book ever written?
Oh, I got to say The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. If you haven't read it, it's not necessarily a business book, but it's a toss-up between that and The 5 Love Languages. For business, like actually for business. But most people don't think of it, but check it out and you'll see why.
Well, and it's exactly what you said about mentors, right? I mean, sometimes you got to step out of your space to learn and grow from people who see the world just a little bit differently. And so I appreciate that book recommendation. Now, before we go, Dana, is there any last bit of advice that you can give us to help us reach our full potential? And then take a minute and share how we can get in touch with you.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, reach our full potential. Yeah. Here's the one thing I would tell you, because I did not do this when I was starting out. We talked about passion and putting your passion into your business, but follow your gifts. Follow what you're actually really good at, the thing that comes easy to you, most easy to you, that you do in half the time it takes other people, or people don't understand how you're so good at it. Pursue that in your business. And then figure out, after you're pursuing that, how you can infuse your passions and your movement into what you're doing. Because if you just pursue the passion, but you're not considering your gifts, you're going to end up working a lot harder and probably making a lot less. Whereas if you approach it the other way around, you're much more likely for a success. So I did not do that starting out and learned my lesson. So I want to make sure everybody knows that. And then getting a hold of me is boss-mom.com is where we hang out. That'll get you to our Facebook group, which is just almost 10,000 strong. That'll show you where the podcast is. So it's the Boss Mom Podcast. That'll show you all of our blogs and our community and way to get a hold of me and hang out with us, and gets you to my Trello training. So I show you behind the scenes on how I use that. So boss-mom.com is the best place to start.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so if I could just reiterate just what you said, because I think you tied it up so beautifully. And not only did you say it beautifully, but I think throughout this whole podcast, you really showed us. And that is, you got to find what you're good at. You got to find your gift and then infuse that passion in it. And it's clear to us, Dana, that you are gifted in speaking. You're gifted in coaching. And now that you've put your passion behind it, I mean, we can really hear it in your voice. We really appreciate the time that you've taken to be on the Modern Leadership Podcast, to impart your leadership wisdom to us. And we really appreciate all that you do for boss moms and boss dads and everyone else in the world.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been a blast.
Hey guys, what did I tell you? I told you that you would love Dana. She has such passion and she's just so excited about everything that she's doing. And she has taken her business to the next level by infusing that passion with what she's good at. Some of the things that I really pulled out from this episode, from this interview, things that she taught us that I think that we need to keep on the tops of our minds as leaders. One of them is that we only have a role at work. We have other roles at home. We have other roles in life. And that to be successful as a leader, we need to pack a lot into those roles, but we need to balance them as well. The other thing she talked about is that work is not a bad word. It's not, especially if you can find what you're good at and tie that into what you're excited about and then go out there and give it to people that are looking for it. Work is not a bad word. The other thing we talked about is, how do you get excited? How do you get pumped up after you're down after a tough day? That's envision the future. Know what's exciting on the horizon that you're continuing to work for. And then finally, we talked mentorship, right? We talked about how you can learn from everyone, how there's so many opportunities out there to learn, that if you go out there and talk to people who have different backgrounds and different views of the world, that they can show you your blind spots and they can see things that you don't see. So I absolutely really appreciate having Dana Malstaff on the podcast. It's been so fun to interview all of these leadership experts. And of course, I want to remind you, we got the contest going on over on jakeacarlson.com/win. There you can go over and win Amazon gift card, win some books, or win a free course by me. There's a lot of great stuff. Go over there. It's part of the podcast launch party. Today is the very first day of the podcast. And of course, we have a bunch of episodes out, so you can go check them out. Our next episode, already live, you can go listen to it right now, is on confidence and how we can use that superpower, the superpower of confidence, to take our lives and our businesses and everything that we're doing to the next level. Of course, everything is found jakeacarlson.com. And until I see you next week, or I guess next episode, have a great day, make a great life, and stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.